Today, we delve into the potential effects of Hainan's new customs regime on Singapore, using data and logic to deconstruct the doom and gloom narratives. On the 18th of December 2025, Hainan officially launched its new customs regime, a bold and strategic step, and in many ways a natural progression for the island. The move is not unexpected, given Hainan's geographic advantages and the strong backing of China's central government. Hainan's free trade port represents China's boldest reform since 1978, aiming to integrate with global trade. However, this move has sparked concerns about its impact on Singapore's port status. To foresee the future, we must understand the past. The Hainan's journey from a special economic zone to a free trade port highlights strategic collaborations and policy shifts over decades. This table, from publicly available sources, shows the key events from 1988 where Hainan was designated as China's fifth special economic zone, says, till December 2025 when this news was announced. Note that in 2012, Singapore through Jurong Port had invested in Hainan, and in June 2025 PSA of Singapore had also signed collaboration agreements with Hainan. To reach the grand vision of developing Hainan into a globally influential free trade and logistics hub by 2050, will require a growing level of maturity in its economy. According to a Cakeson Global report, Hainan currently faces several structural challenges. Its economic base remains underdeveloped, largely rooted in agriculture and primary industries. The island also struggles with talent and investment shortages, attracting only a small share of China's FDI, resulting in comparatively low wages and skilled talent shortages. On the other hand, until recent years, real estate had been overinvested, accounting for roughly 46% of the province's GDP, an unusually high proportion by national standards. Therefore, despite strong central backing to make Hainan a major gateway, its economic and institutional underdevelopment remains a significant barrier to achieving FTP goals. Hainan's free trade port is not new, meaning competitors have been aware of its trajectory, and agile competitors would have built some responses. A SWOT analysis shows that Hainan's FTP can represent a challenge not just to Singapore, but also its peers. Hainan has several competitive home advantages, but the competition dynamic is complex and multidimensional, as can be seen in evidence of collaboration and co-investment between competitors. Ironically, it is the smaller ports, or those not in the main arterial route, that may get even more marginalized, while the big two ports, SG, CN, get more business. Cases have been circular quoted and recycled by various media and persons. For instance, there are documented cases of Indonesian cargo vessels rerouting directly to Hainan's Yangpu port instead of Singapore, achieving cost savings of up to 32%. Even if granted such cases to be true and exact, however, it is the total sum of competitive factors that determines the eventual winner, and no single factor can determine the final outcome in the long marathon. So, while shipping costs do matter, they are not a necessary nor sufficient condition to decide the winner. Thus, arguments based on so-called savings in shipping costs is too simple. Well, as is often said, amateurs look at shipping cost, professionals look at total cost. Media often highlights shipping cost differences between Hainan and Singapore as the killer stroke. However, do remember that buying shipping is not the same as going to the market to buy vegetables. Surely, analysts are not countryside uncles and aunties on a trip to the market, right? AI sentiment analysis reveals some media's over-coverage on Hainan's free trade port, often portraying it as an immediate threat to Singapore's port status, using phrases such as collapsed, panic, or shocked. General search would show a disproportionate amount of media attention from TW news channels, often daily and across channels, since the day after December 18th. AI analysis have found them to be aggressive, alarmist, and non-neutral, often pushing for zero-sum scenarios. We must wonder why. Is AI concluding that perhaps their real agenda is not news, actually? Despite negative narratives, Singapore remains a top maritime center, maintaining its long-standing competitiveness against emerging threats. Singapore in 2025, for the 12th consecutive year, has been ranked a top shipping center, with an astounding score of 99.5 out of 100. No matter, Singapore is facing imminent collapse from a late entrant 1/20th in 2 shipping volume, as according to the doomsayers. Despite the hype, Hainan Ports has not been in the top rankings as of 2025. Singapore continues to be a leading port globally. Historical data shows Singapore's consistent top ranking. This is astounding because many would complacently think that it is easy. Through this research, we can see that in 2005, HK was number 1 port but is not even in top 10 in year 2024 or 25. Hainan has never been in the top 10 based on the statistics gathered. This shows that competition is intense, and one's position is never assured. Thus, Singapore showed strong staying power throughout those years, even in the face of more and more port competitors from China, which ironically had knocked down HK. If that is not strength, what is? As such, it is also possible that Hainan will face harder competition from its nearby peers than Singapore would be facing from Hainan. In 2024, Yangpu and Batam handled 2 million TEU and less than 1 million TEU, respectively. Singapore reached a record high of 41.1 million TEUs, maintaining its status as the world's largest transshipment hub. Meanwhile, 6 of the world's top 10 ports are now located in mainland China, a reflection of China as being the factory of the world. Finally, Batam and Yangpu are being developed as strategic free trade hubs to capture regional feeder traffic, in line with the ASEAN vision of better regional connectivity. Hainan Port is a new challenger that has various home advantages. To become number 1, it has to displace not just Singapore, but also need to cannibalize market share from its peers such as Shanghai or Shenzhen. Overall, Yangpu is growing faster, but will require many years of constant careful effort to scale up. Unbridled growth, as in their property sector, can result in a crash. On the other hand, assuming as per the hyperbole, that 100% traffic is captured by Hainan immediately, what would happen then? Obviously, it will result in such a gigantic land and sea traffic jam at the same time, over there, that in comparison the JB Causeway jam would be a nothing burger. The green lines represents current shipping traffic in Asia, captured from GPS data. Viewer can test their geography knowledge of where is Singapore and Hainan based on the green lines. Hainan Indonesia case is often the cited poster boy, but shipping traffic density shows almost invisible lines. This can be understood when we look at their trade. Indonesia exports to China mostly input resources and commodities such as coconuts. In reverse, China exports to Indonesia mostly manufactured goods, machines, electronics, chemicals, vehicles. As such, there can be a mismatch in ship types if Indonesia ships coconuts to Hainan, but that same ship may not be suited to ship back other goods, and yes, Hainan produces coconuts as well. Just ask, would anyone want to consume coconuts from a ship that was shipping chemicals on the return leg? As such, direct lining can impact the total overall profit of the shipping lines if there is insufficient volume and mismatch in goods shipped between the to and fro legs. Again, other sources collaborate on what is the trade flows. Logically, if there is a mismatch in goods transported between to and fro, the shipping companies may not find it very profitable to service those direct lines, except maybe for national service. This also implies goods shipped from SG to CN versus ID to CN is largely different, and thus can be complementary, rather than competing. Regardlessly, direct lines, if built over time, can increase optionalities and overall efficiencies of intra-Asia trade, thereby growing the trade pie overall. Next, an often cited reason for alternate routing is to circumvent a possible block in the Malacca Straits, which is a valid reason. However, looking cursorily at the map, and depending on the destination, the economics during normal times does not make sense, as it would be much longer. For instance, going via a more southern bound route such as through the Indonesian archipelago would not be as economical generally, and it may not also solve the security of passage conundrum. Tariffs reduction has been the touted headline attraction. Direct port-to-port shipping savings was another argument. However, it is important to know that since Hainan is an island, therefore savings from shipping through Hainan may be negated if goods are to be further shipped to mainland China. This point is so obvious that I am not sure why nobody else talks about it. Next, transshipment out of Hainan to US can incur higher or punitive tariffs, whereas transshipping from Singapore attracts a lower tariff. Thus, it may not make sense for ASEAN countries to transship via Hainan. Thirdly, China-ASEAN already has FTA agreements stipulating low or zero tariff rates, so where is the extra benefit to transship via Hainan? Concluding this layman's exercise to the construction, using a simple logical walkthrough, supported by generally available data, we get the following key takeaways. Competition is ever present, and the dynamic is quite complex and multidimensional. There is no room to rest even if one is at the top. There are always new entrants and new challenges. In fact, the Arctic route can even be a bigger challenge than Hainan. Ever-increasing continuous forward investment in terms of technologies, capital and human talent is required to sustain pole positions. In today's hyper-competitive environment, no challenger can become pole if there is no breadth and depth in constant multi-year forward-looking investments to build scale, depth, networks and an ecosystem. Overall, and over time, by adding nodes and optionalities, the net result is a positive sum game for China-ASEAN trade pie. On the other hand, gloom remains a fantasy for some, and over monodimensional views comes from simpler agendic minds who cannot see. The end message encourages a shift from zero-sum thinking to collaborative ecosystems, highlighting the benefits of win-win strategies in global trade.